Mr. Rose has accepted baseball's ultimate sanction, which is lifetime ineligibility.
I'm happy to look in the camera now and say I never bet on baseball, and I never bet on Cincinnati Red baseball. Yes, I did, and that was my mistake.
Look at this slide. You wonder where the headfirst slide is.
The screen is black, you hear the crack of a bat hitting a ball, then the roar of a crowd, 4 Yauku's 56 hits, the most in baseball history. Montage footage shows Pete Rose hitting, diving, sliding head first into bases with reckless abandon. But there's another number that tells his story. Numbers appear on screen: 10,328 outs, more failures than anyone who ever played the game. And yet, as we see Rose making out after out, but getting up every single time, he kept trying. The title card appears with dramatic music showing the Hit King's final inning and Pete Rose's journey from banishment to redemption. April 14th, 1941, Cincinnati, Ohio. Peter Edward Rose was born without the 5-tool talent scouts dream about. He wasn't the fastest, he wasn't the most powerful, he didn't have the strongest arm, but he had something else. Listen to what he once said: "If you have someone with ability equal to mine, I'll win every time because I'll try harder." This wasn't just confidence, this was a competitive philosophy, a doctrine that would define not just a career, but an entire era of baseball. They called him Charlie Hustle, and that nickname became his identity. Every at-bat, every ground ball, every single play was an opportunity to outwork the competition, to show that determination could triumph over natural talent. To prove that the player who wanted it more would ultimately prevail, Rose understood something fundamental about baseball that many of his contemporaries missed. The game wasn't just about God-given ability. It was about the willingness to maximize every opportunity, to turn every plate appearance into a chance to make history. His father, Harry Rose, had been a semi-professional football player who instilled in young Pete the importance of physical toughness and mental resilience. Growing up in the Western Hills neighborhood of Cincinnati, Rose would spend countless hours playing pickup games, developing the scrappy, aggressive style that would become his trademark. He wasn't blessed with the natural swing of a Ted Williams or the power of a Hank Aaron, but what he lacked in innate talent he made up for with an almost pathological dedication to improvement. Rose would take extra batting practice until his hands bled. He would run sprints until his legs gave out. He would study pitchers with the intensity of a graduate student preparing for comprehensive exams. This wasn't normal dedication. This was obsession, and it would carry him from the sandlots of Cincinnati to the hallowed grounds of Major League Baseball. When Rose signed his first professional contract with the Cincinnati Reds organization in 1960, scouts weren't particularly impressed. They saw a kid with average tools, decent speed, limited power, nothing that screamed future superstar, but they missed something crucial. They missed the fire in his eyes, the determination in his stride, the unwillingness to accept failure as anything other than temporary setback. Rose began his professional career in the low minor leagues, working his way through Geneva in the New York Penn League, where he hit 277 with modest power numbers. Nothing spectacular, nothing that would make headlines. But Rose wasn't discouraged. He knew that his path to the majors would be longer and harder than players with more natural ability. He embraced that reality, used it as fuel, turned it into motivation that burned hotter with each passing season. By 1963, Rose had earned his way to the major leagues, and in his rookie season he won the National League Rookie of the Year award, hitting 273 with 170 hits, already demonstrating the consistency that would define his career. But it was the style of play that caught people's attention. Rose ran to first base on walks. He slid headfirst into bases with abandon. He played with a reckless energy that seemed almost unseemly to baseball purists who valued controlled elegance over raw enthusiasm. Legendary Yankee Mickey Mantle nicknamed him Charlie Hustle. And while it may have been intended as mockery, Rose embraced it, turned it into his brand, made it his identity. Rose's approach to the game was revolutionary in many ways. He challenged the traditional notion that baseball should be played with cool detachment, that showing too much emotion or effort was somehow undignified. Rose played like every game mattered, like every at-bat could be his last. This intensity resonated with working-class fans who saw themselves in his blue-collar approach. He wasn't a natural aristocrat of the game like Willie Mays or Joe DiMaggio. He was one of them, a grinder who made himself great through sheer force of will. Rose's hitting approach was methodical and disciplined. He studied pitchers obsessively, keeping detailed mental notes on their tendencies, their favorite counts, their go-to pitches in crucial situations. He understood that hitting wasn't just about physical ability, it was about preparation, about gaining every possible edge through knowledge and preparation. Rose would arrive at the ballpark hours before game time, taking extra batting practice, working on his swing, staying ready. He treated baseball like a full-time job, at a time when many players viewed it as a seasonal occupation. Rose's consistency was remarkable. He had 10 seasons with 200 or more hits, a feat matched by only a handful of players in baseball history. He led the National League in hits 7 times, in doubles 5 times, in runs scored 4 times. These weren't just volume statistics accumulated through longevity, though longevity was certainly part of his success. These were numbers that demonstrated sustained excellence over more than 2 decades. Rose's ability to maintain his production into his 40s was particularly impressive. In 1979, at age 38, he put together a 44-game hitting streak with the Philadelphia Phillies, the second longest in National League history. This streak demonstrated that Rose's approach to hitting wasn't dependent on youthful reflexes or physical prowess. It was built on discipline, preparation, and an almost scientific understanding of the hitting process. During this streak, Rose became a national sensation, appearing on television talk shows, gracing magazine covers, embodying the everyman who achieved greatness through persistence rather than genetic gifts. Over 24 years, Rose accumulated numbers that still seem impossible. 456 hits, 3,562 games played, 14,053 at-bats, 3,215 singles, all-time records, every single one. But here's what most people miss, that 10,032 weight outs record. That's not a failure statistic. That's proof of presence. That's evidence of a man who showed up for nearly every possible game across 2 decades and gave everything he had, regardless of the outcome, win or lose, success or failure. Rose was there. Rose was trying. Rose was competing with every fiber of his being. As Rose himself said, "When I get the record, all that will make me is the player with the most hits. I'm also the player with the most at-bats and the most outs." This self-awareness, this understanding of the mathematical reality behind his success, shows a player who knew exactly what his legacy meant. He wasn't just collecting hits, he was collecting at-bats. He was maximizing his opportunity to contribute, to compete, to be present in the game he loved more than anything else in the world. Throughout his career, Rose demonstrated remarkable versatility, playing 5 different positions at an all-star level. He started as a second baseman, moved to left field, then right field, then third base, and finally first base. This adaptability showed a player willing to do whatever his team needed, willing to sacrifice personal comfort and preference for team success. Rose made 17 All-Star appearances across 4 different positions. A testament to his ability to excel wherever he was placed, he won 3 batting titles. In 1968 with a 335 average, in 1969 hitting 348, and in 1973 batting 338. These weren't just good seasons, these were years of absolute dominance at the plate. Years where Rose was simply better than almost everyone else in baseball. He won the National League MVP award in 1973, the same year he led the league in hits with 230 and doubles with 36, proving that his value extended beyond just accumulating singles. Rose could drive the ball into gaps, could manufacture runs, could do whatever was needed to help his team win, but individual records don't win championships. And Pete Rose knew that better than anyone. The 1970s Cincinnati Reds, the Big Red Machine, one of the greatest dynasties in baseball history, and at its heart, 4 superstars who understood something fundamental about winning: Pete Rose, Johnny Bench, Joe Morgan, Tony Perez. These weren't just talented players thrown together by circumstance. They were complementary pieces of a perfectly constructed championship machine, each bringing specialized excellence that the others lacked. The Reds of the 1970s won 6 division titles, 4 National League pennants, and 2 World Series championships. They were a machine in the truest sense, operating with precision and efficiency, overwhelming opponents with talent, depth, and an unwavering commitment to excellence. Rose called Johnny Bench the best catcher in the history of baseball. Period. Not one of the best. The best. And when Rose's own son wanted to become a catcher, Pete told him, "Watch Johnny Bench. That's respect. That's understanding. That excellence comes in different forms. That leadership behind the plate requires a different skill set than relentless hitting." Bench wasn't just calling pitches and blocking balls in the dirt. He was commanding the game from the most demanding position on the field. He was a leader who inspired confidence in his pitchers, a defensive stalwart who shut down running games, and an offensive threat who could change the complexion of a game with one swing. Rose recognized all of this, celebrated it, learned from it, and when Bench later expressed his frustration with Rose's gambling scandal by saying, "Damn it, Pete," it carried the weight of a disappointed brother, someone who had shared the foxhole of championship baseball and couldn't understand why his teammate had thrown it all away. Rose's relationship with Bench was complex. They were teammates but also competitors, both alpha personalities who wanted to be the face of the franchise, Yet they understood that their individual success was inextricably linked to team success. The 1975 World Series against the Boston Red Sox showcased the Big Red Machine at its finest. Game 6 of that series is widely considered one of the greatest games in baseball history, featuring Carlton Fisk's iconic home run in the 12th inning. But the Reds won Game 7, capturing the championship. Rose hit 370 in that series with 10 hits, demonstrating his ability to elevate his game on the biggest stage. The following year, the Reds swept the New York Yankees in 4 games, cementing their status as one of baseball's greatest dynasties. Rose hit 357 in that series. Continuing his postseason excellence, after the 1978 season, Rose became a free agent and signed with the Philadelphia Phillies, leaving Cincinnati after 16 seasons. This decision shocked many Reds fans who viewed Rose as synonymous with their franchise. But Rose was chasing both money and the opportunity to win another championship. The Phillies offered a lucrative 4-year contract and a chance to play in the competitive National League East. Rose's time in Philadelphia was successful. He helped the Phillies win the 1980 World Series, their first championship in franchise history, defeating the Kansas City Royals in 6 games. Rose hit 261 in that series, but his leadership and experience were invaluable to a team that had consistently fallen short in previous postseason appearances. Joe Morgan brought speed and dynamism Rose could never match. And Rose knew it, he once joked. "I'm not bad. I'm no Joe Morgan, but I'm pretty good for a white guy." That self-awareness, that ability to recognize and celebrate his teammates' superior skills, that's what made the machine work. Rose brought relentless effort. Morgan brought elite speed. Bench brought leadership and defensive mastery. Perez brought clutch hitting when it mattered most. Tony Perez stood out because he was a clutch hitter, the kind of player who elevated his game in the biggest moments, who thrived under pressure when others wilted. Perez's home runs in the 1975 World Series weren't just impressive statistical achievements. They were examples of mental toughness, of preparation, meeting opportunity, of a player who understood that the regular season builds the foundation. But October baseball defines legacies, back-to-back World Series championships, 1975 and 1976, 4 Hall of Famers working as one perfectly balanced unit. The Big Red Machine wasn't just about talent. It was about chemistry, about understanding roles, about sacrificing individual glory for collective success. And Rose, despite being the statistical leader, despite chasing individual records, never lost sight of the ultimate goal, winning championships. But Rose's competitive fire didn't end when he hung up his cleats as a player. In 1984, he became player-manager of the Reds, returning to Cincinnati after spending 5 seasons with the Philadelphia Phillies and 1 season with the Montreal Expos. Rose's return to Cincinnati wasn't just a homecoming, it was a chance to chase Ty Cobb's seemingly untouchable all-time hit record of 4,091, a mark that had stood since 1928. Rose was 42 years old when he returned to the Reds, an age when most players have long since retired. But his obsessive conditioning and professional approach to the game kept him productive. The pursuit of Cobb's record became a national obsession throughout the 1984 and 1985 seasons. With media coverage intensifying as Rose closed in on the milestone, every game became an event. Every at-bat potentially historic, Rose handled the pressure with characteristic confidence, never showing doubt that he would break the record. On September 8, 1985, Rose tied Cobb's record with hit number 491 against the Chicago Cubs. Then 3 days later, on September 11, 1985, at Riverfront Stadium in Cincinnati before a sellout crowd of over 47,000 fans, Rose singled to left center field off San Diego Padres. Pitcher Eric Show in the first inning to record his 4,092nd career hit, breaking a record that many thought would never be surpassed. The game was stopped for 7 minutes as the crowd erupted in sustained applause. His teammates mobbed him at first base. Even the Padres players applauded from their dugout, recognizing the historical significance of the moment. Baseball Commissioner Peter Ueberroth came onto the field to present Rose with a red Corvette and other gifts. The moment was pure baseball. Theater, a feel-good story of perseverance and dedication triumphing over time and expectation. Rose was emotional in his speech to the crowd, thanking the fans of Cincinnati for their support throughout his career, acknowledging that he had been blessed to play the game he loved for so long. It was the pinnacle of his career, the moment that should have cemented his legacy as one of baseball's immortals, one of the untouchable legends whose achievements would be celebrated for generations. Rose continued playing after breaking the record, adding to his total and making it even more difficult for future players to challenge. He finally retired as a player on August 17, 1986 at age 45. His final career statistics reading like a fantasy: 4,256 hits, 3,762 games played, 14,053 at-bats, 3,215 singles, 746 doubles, 160 triples, 160 home runs. He scored 2,165 runs and drove in 314, compiled a career batting average of 303 with a 375 on-base percentage and 409 slugging percentage. These numbers tell only part of the story. They don't capture his competitive fire, his leadership, his ability to elevate teammates, his clutch performances in the biggest games, taking on the dual responsibility of contributing on the field while guiding the team from the dugout. And that's where the next chapter of his legacy was written. Rose's managerial career began while he was still playing. He became player manager of the Reds in August 1984, replacing Vern Rapp. This arrangement was unusual even then. Most teams had moved away from the player manager model, recognizing that the demands of both roles were difficult to balance. But Rose thrived on such challenges, believing that his presence on the field gave him credibility in the clubhouse that non-playing managers lacked. As manager, Rose compiled a record of 412 wins and 373 losses over 5 seasons, a respectable 525 winning percentage, but his teams never reached the playoffs, finishing second in the National League West Division 3 times, but never quite breaking through in the pre-wildcard era. Second place meant going home. No matter how close you came, Rose's managerial style reflected his playing philosophy. He valued hustle, effort, aggressive base running, and manufacturing runs. He wasn't afraid to make unconventional decisions, to trust young players, to shake up the lineup when things weren't working, taking on the dual responsibility of contributing on the field while guiding the team from the dugout. And that's where the next chapter of his legacy was written. As manager, Rose never reached the playoffs. His record was solid, 412 wins, 373 losses. But no October baseball, no chance to prove himself in the postseason spotlight that had defined his playing career. Yet his greatest contribution as a manager might have been something that didn't show up in the standings, something that wouldn't be fully appreciated until after he was gone. Eric Davis was just 21 years old when Rose became his manager, raw talent, aggressive, uncertain about his place in the big leagues, and Rose saw something in him that others might have missed. Davis later said, "The confidence Rose instilled in him was phenomenal." Rose told him, "Don't worry about the pressure. Don't worry about your job. Just go out and play." Psychological freedom. That's what Rose gave him. The same freedom that Rose had given himself throughout his career. The ability to play without fear, to be aggressive without worrying about failure. And Davis blossomed into a star, becoming one of the most dynamic players in baseball during the late 1980s. Then there's Barry Larkin, a kid from Cincinnati who grew up imitating Pete Rose's headfirst slide, who watched the Big Red Machine on television and dreamed of wearing the Reds uniform. And when Larkin made his major league debut, he arrived late due to travel delays. No uniform ready, no equipment. So Pete Rose, his manager, lent him his own shoes and bat. Imagine that moment, a rookie using the equipment of baseball's all-time hit king. For his first game, Larkin got his first major league hit with Rose's equipment. After the game, Rose congratulated him and then immediately said, "Good, now give them back." That was the lesson. I'll help you get started, but excellence must be earned. Dedication must be yours, the equipment, the success, the legacy. Those things belong to those who work for them. Larkin went on to become a Hall of Famer, a 12-time All-Star, the 1995 National League MVP, a complete player who embodied everything Rose had tried to teach him about playing the game the right way, and here's the kicker. In 1990, the year after Rose was banished from baseball, the Reds won the World Series. The core of that team, players Rose had mentored, Davis, Larkin, others he'd developed, they swept the heavily favored Oakland Athletics in 4 games, shocking the baseball world and proving that Rose's impact extended beyond his own playing career. His managerial failure wasn't developmental. He had prepared his players for success, instilled in them the competitive fire and work ethic that had defined his own career. His failure was about to become something far worse, something that would overshadow everything he had accomplished. August 24th, 1989, Pete Rose voluntarily accepted permanent ineligibility from Major League Baseball. The Dowd report had confirmed what many suspected. Rose had been gambling on baseball, on his own team, on the Cincinnati Reds while he was player manager. Betting on the team you manage creates an impossible conflict of interest. It raises questions about every decision, every lineup choice, every pitching change. Was this move made to win the game or to win the bet? The institution of baseball couldn't allow such ambiguity, couldn't permit even the appearance of compromised competitive integrity. 2 years later, in 1991, the Baseball Hall of Fame made it official. Anyone on the permanently ineligible list could not be inducted. This wasn't just about Rose, though he was clearly the primary target of the rule. It was about establishing a clear boundary, about saying that certain transgressions put you beyond the pale of institutional recognition. For 15 years, Rose denied it. He looked into cameras and insisted he had never bet on baseball. He signed autographs and memorabilia with denials written alongside his signature. He maintained his innocence even as the evidence mounted, even as former associates came forward with testimony, even as his own betting slips surfaced. Then, in 2004, he finally admitted the truth. Yes, he bet on baseball. Yes, he bet on the Reds. The admission came in his autobiography, a calculated decision to finally acknowledge what everyone already knew, but the admission didn't bring the redemption he hoped for. His teammates, the men who'd shared the Big Red Machine with him, were devastated. Johnny Bench, who'd caught alongside him, who'd won championships with him, who'd defended him for years, expressed his frustration publicly. "Damn it, Pete." Those 3 words carried the weight of betrayal, disappointment, and lost faith. Bench had believed in Rose, had wanted to believe that his friend and teammate was innocent, and the admission shattered that belief. Rose petitioned for reinstatement multiple times, each time arguing that he had served his sentence, that he deserved another chance, that his on-field accomplishments should outweigh his off-field transgressions. In 2015, Commissioner Rob Manfred rejected his petition, saying Rose had not presented credible evidence of a reconfigured life. The commissioner wanted to see genuine change, real accountability, evidence that Rose understood the gravity of his actions and had fundamentally altered his relationship with gambling. But Rose couldn't provide that evidence. Years passed, then decades. The same competitive drive that made Rose chase 4,256 hits had become a compulsion he couldn't control. The doctrine of hustle had a dark side, the inability to accept limitations, the refusal to acknowledge when the game was over. Rose once said, "I'd walk through hell in a gasoline suit to play baseball." That intensity, that inability to stop competing, it gave him everything, and then it took everything away. The fire that drove him to unprecedented success as a player became the fire that consumed his legacy. During his exile from baseball, Rose remained in the public eye, signing autographs at memorabilia shows, making appearances on television programs, maintaining his celebrity status even as he was barred from the sport that made him famous. He signed countless baseballs and photographs, often adding inscriptions like, "I'm sorry I bet on baseball," or 4256, "banned for life," turning his shame into commerce, monetizing his controversy in ways that many found distasteful. Some saw this as Rose's inability to show genuine remorse, his willingness to profit from his misdeeds. Others viewed it as a man doing what he had to do to survive, using the only currency he had left, his fame and his infamy. Throughout these years, Rose maintained relationships with other baseball legends, particularly Ichiro Suzuki, the Japanese star who many believed would eventually challenge Rose's hit record. Rose frequently called Ichiro his favorite active player, due to the Japanese star's exceptional ability to accumulate hits. A statistical focus that mirrored Rose's own career obsession, Ichiro had accumulated over 3,000 hits in Major League Baseball. After a dominant career in Japan where he collected over 1,000 additional hits, the question became whether Ichiro's combined professional total should be compared to Rose's MLB-only record. Rose initially seemed defensive about this comparison, protective of his record, but eventually came to embrace Ichiro's pursuit, recognizing a kindred spirit, someone who shared his obsession with the pure act of getting hits. Ichiro himself noted that Rose's eventual public acknowledgement, even if tinged with competitiveness, made him actually happy to see the hit king get defensive, leading him to feel accepted by the man whose record he was chasing. September 30th, 2024, Pete Rose died at age 83, still banned, still outside the Hall of Fame, still arguing for his reinstatement. Even in his final years, his death marked the end of one of baseball's most complicated legacies, but death, it turned out, would change what life could not. 2025, just months after Rose's death, MLB Commissioner Rob Manfred made a historic decision. Pete Rose was removed from the permanently ineligible list. After 36 years, his ban was lifted. He was eligible for the Hall of Fame. The decision came after Rose's family petitioned the commissioner, arguing that the permanent ban had served its purpose, that Rose had lived and died with the consequences of his actions. Rose wasn't alone. 17 figures who died while on the ineligible list, including shoeless Joe Jackson from the 1919 Black Sox scandal, were all reinstated. This sweeping decision represented a fundamental shift in how baseball approached historical injustices and permanent punishments. The Cincinnati Reds organization released a statement. Principal owner Bob Castellini said, "Pete Rose is one of the greatest players in baseball history, and Reds country will continue to celebrate him as we always have." The Reds had never abandoned Rose. They had honored him at their ballpark, celebrated his achievements, kept his memory alive even while he remained banned. But here's what happens next. Eligibility doesn't mean induction. In 2027, the classic baseball era committee will meet. They'll vote on whether Pete Rose deserves to be in the Hall of Fame. He'll need 75% of the votes. The committee consists of former players, executives, and media members who will weigh Rose's statistical achievements against his ethical failures. They'll debate whether the Hall of Fame is a museum that should reflect baseball history in all its complexity, or a shrine that should honor only those who meet both on-field and off-field standards of excellence. So now comes the question that will define how we remember Pete Rose. Can his competitive brilliance, 4,256 hits, 24 years of relentless hustle, mentoring Hall of Famers, embodying dedication, can that outweigh the ethical failure that cost him 36 years? Pete Rose's story is about contradictions. A man who gave everything to baseball and then betrayed it. A player who failed more than anyone in history and yet succeeded more than almost anyone. A competitor so driven he couldn't stop competing even when it destroyed him. But here's what remains. Every time a player runs out a ground ball, every time someone dives for a ball, they might not reach. Every time a rookie is told to hustle, that's Pete Rose's legacy. The doctrine of hustle. The belief that effort matters, that showing up matters, that trying harder can make the difference. In 2027, the voters will decide whether that legacy deserves Cooperstown, whether the Hit King finally gets his crown. But regardless of what happens in that vote, one thing is certain. Pete Rose changed baseball. He showed us that greatness doesn't require the most talent, it requires the most heart. The debate over Rose's Hall of Fame worthiness raises fundamental questions about what the institution represents. Is the Hall of Fame a museum that should document baseball history in all its complexity, including the flawed and the fallen? Or is it a shrine meant to honor only those who meet the highest standards of both on-field excellence and off-field integrity? Baseball writers and historians have argued both sides passionately. Some contend that Rose's on-field achievements are so overwhelming, so statistically undeniable that they transcend his gambling transgressions. They argue that the Hall already includes players with serious character flaws, from racists to cheaters to those who used performance-enhancing drugs. Why should Rose be held to a different standard? Others maintain that betting on baseball represents the ultimate sin, a direct threat to the integrity of competition itself. They point out that Rose wasn't just a player who made bad personal choices, he was a manager who bet on games he controlled, creating impossible conflicts of interest that struck at the heart of competitive fairness. The Black Sox scandal of 1919 demonstrated what happens when players compromise games for gambling interests, leading to the lifetime ban of shoeless Joe Jackson and 7 teammates. Baseball's leadership decided then that gambling on games represented an existential threat to the sport, a line that could never be crossed without severe consequences. Pete Rose knew this. Every clubhouse in baseball displayed signs warning that gambling on baseball would result in permanent expulsion, yet he did it anyway. Repeatedly, compulsively, unable to stop himself even knowing the consequences. This pattern of behavior suggests something deeper than simple moral failure. It suggests a man whose competitive drive had become pathological, whose need to be involved in the action extended beyond the playing field into the dangerous world of bookmakers and betting slips. Rose's supporters often point to the fact that he only bet on his team to win, never to lose, as if this somehow mitigates the transgression. But this argument misses the point entirely. Betting on your team to win creates its own set of problems. It may lead a manager to overuse his best pitchers in games he's wagered on, leaving the team vulnerable in subsequent games. It compromises decision-making, turning every choice into a potential conflict between team interest and personal financial interest. Even the appearance of such conflicts damages the integrity of the game, makes fans question whether what they're watching is legitimate competition or something corrupted by hidden interests. 4,256 hits, 10,328 outs, one unforgettable legacy. This was the Hit King's final inning.